To continue Reply Week, I would like to now do Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk. Now, he recently did a video on the DPRK and the new ICBM test, which was intended to look like something progressive when it was just a bash the DPRK kind of fest. Now, what's really interesting is that it's secular talk. This is a rejection of religion and taking things on faith. Yet he repeats some of the most obvious and insane lies about the DPRK, claiming that their leader, never went to the bathroom or hit a perfect game. These are not things that the DPRK actually claimed, or that Kim Jong-il invented the hamburger. They've never claimed this. This is something the Western media claims that they said, but can't demonstrate anything to back it up. In fact, I even did a video on this, the claim about Kim Jong-il having invented the hamburger, when really all the Korean state media said was that he had announced the opening of a hamburger factory. Nothing about having invented it. It's a complete lie. And yet here we see so-called secular talk taking all of these things on complete faith. Well, I don't think it requires me to say that if you take something on faith, that's really not being very secular, now is it? Now, he criticizes the mainstream media for misrepresenting the situation with the DPRK, like they're actually responding to what the U.S. is doing. But then he goes ahead and believes the insane, crazy things which are the justifications for going in and declaring war. The justifications for going ahead and opposing the DPRK. So what is he talking about here? Like, he's claiming that he doesn't believe the mainstream media narrative, yet he goes ahead and reinforces it by believing the absurdity that's put out to justify hostilities against the country. And of course, he does the usual Holocaust baiting, like David Pakman does. He claims that there's hard labor camps, concentration camps from the DPRK. Well, you see, there's a big difference between a labor camp and a concentration camp. A labor camp is where you go and you do labor. A concentration camp is where you go to die. Now, people go to labor camps and then they come out when their prison sentence is over. This is not the same thing as sending someone into a concentration camp where they're never going to leave. But of course, secular talk doesn't have the kind of intellectual honesty to actually differentiate between the two things, because he is too busy mindlessly repeating what the mainstream media told him without giving it any kind of critical thought whatsoever. And he goes over the same thing. Well, just look how dark it is at night. It says, well, look how their country's holding them back. Do you believe that the DPRK is really intentionally trying to impoverish itself? I get the idea that Mr. Kulinski doesn't know what he's talking about. Countries don't deliberately impoverish themselves, particularly when they're ones who are as independent as the DPRK is. Not to mention anything of completely ignoring the fact that there are energy sanctions against the country, and that it is struggling to deal with as little as possible due to these sanctions and embargoes that have been placed upon them for decades. But again, he just completely ignores that and just mindlessly repeats what has been put out by the mainstream media. And of course, he claims that the DPRK is a gnat. It would just be squashed in a second by the United States. Of course, what he fails to understand is that the DPRK doesn't have a massive offensive military. It has a massive defensive military, where the majority of the population in the DPRK is trained to fight a war. And this is more than can be said for the United States. It's a gnat because they don't have all the fancy ships and whatnot. Well, see, the DPRK does have a rather large military, actually within the top 3 in the entire world. Out of a self-defense measure, it's an entirely defensive-oriented military. Mass artillery to attack the South should they be invaded. Not something a massive aircraft carriers, nuclear weapons that are designed to reach the other side of the world, which they do have now. But he completely misconstrues the whole thing and just repeats the same lie. Oh, the DPRK is just it's just like it's a gnat. It would be squashed in a second. In fact, if that were true, then the United States would have already invaded the country. But they can't, because the consequences for invading the country would be absolutely devastating. And in fact, U.S. military intelligence even admits that invading the DPRK and trying to occupy would be damn near impossible. The task would be so large, it could not be one that they could carry out. Just look at Afghanistan. The United States, aided by several other countries, can't even occupy Afghanistan. And yet they're going to occupy a country as large and as built up as the DPRK is? Come on, that's nonsense. Now he goes on to say that, well, the DPRK doesn't want war. No, it doesn't. It's the United States that wants war. He's just phrasing it like the United States is just doing this to try to pressure them. No, the United States really does want war. That's why they've been threatening it for decades. That's why they have gone through the trouble of placing sanctions, embargoes on the country for decades, because they've been trying to weaken it to a point where they can invade. They do want to invade it. It is the DPRK that wants to be alone, left alone. They don't want to invade the United States. They don't want to carry out that kind of combat. They want to just live in peace. It is the United States that is directly responsible for the DPRK not being able to live in peace because of the hostile actions that the United States always takes. And even then, he resorts to the same old thing about, oh, well, it's the leaders that are bad, but the people are just oppressed and they don't like their leaders. They're all just held hostage and, we can't invade because they're innocent. Well, the fact is, Kim Jong-un actually has about a 50% approval rating by people who have left the country, those who have defected to get away from poverty, and certainly there is a great deal of poverty. It is a third world country, which the United States helps to try to maintain that way. So imagine what the approval rating is by people who are inside the country. Now, this is the thing that we're just told over and over again. Oh, the DPRK, everybody just hates the leaders. Nobody likes the system. Yet for some reason, there's no mass uprisings. There's no, great, huge civil rights problems. The fact is, the majority of the country does support their leadership. They do support their government, mainly because they are under assault from U.S. imperialism. But again, we've already seen that Kulinski won't take a critical look at it. He'll just simply repeat the same mainstream narrative, but then just give it that, pseudo-progressive gloss. Kyle, Secular Talk, you really have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to the DPRK. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.